Political earthquake rocks Europe. The so-called far-right Freedom Party has won the Austrian elections, and the entire election centered on what else? Immigration. We're going to see the latest political bombshell to come out of Europe and see what it means for the future of the populist right everywhere. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you stay sane in these insane times. You know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You know what else I want you to do, gang? I want you to join me in a celebratory kickoff for my brand new book, Fight: How Trump and the MAGA Movement are Changing the World. You know, it's not even officially out yet, and guess what, gang? You have already made this a #1 bestseller on Amazon in 2 different categories. I'm so thankful to all of you who went and pre-ordered the book, and I want to show that gratitude to you. So I'm hosting a live online virtual book launch this Wednesday night, October 2nd. It's completely free, but you do have to register. And as a token of gratitude to everyone who registers, I'm going to send straight to your inbox a chapter from my book completely free. Click on that link below or scan the QR code on the screen and go RSVP right now. I'm going to teach you the things that not only changed my life, but the lives of so many amazing patriots all over the world. And that really is the core of my new book. The MAGA movement is changing the world, all as it's changing us, all as we're being transformed and changed in the process. And if you understand that, gang, it's going to embolden you and impassion you as we head on into November. So this is what I want you to do. Click on that link in the description below or scan the QR code on the screen. Go RSVP for this free online event. Then immediately you're going to get the intro for free as my gift to you. I can't wait to see you all Wednesday night. It's going to be epic. The nation of Austria held its long-anticipated national elections on Sunday, and the big winner of the night, the Austrian Freedom Party, the party denounced by the legacy media's far right, radical right, extreme right, simply because they want to enforce and defend their national sovereignty. It was an absolutely stunning election. It's being called a political earthquake. The Freedom Party won with nearly 30% of the vote in a multi-party election, which means, of course, that 1 in every 3 Austrians are voting for the populist right. The center-right People's Party, they came in second with 26% of the vote. The Greens were decimated. Once again, we've been seeing this. This has been a pattern in a number of elections in Europe over the last year. They collapsed to single digits where they belong, quite frankly. Now, if you want to put this election in historical context, take a look at this. Big shout out to Matt Goodwin for putting these stats together for us. The Austrian Freedom Party actually was one of the first populist right parties to form in Europe. They broke into parliament back in 1990 with almost 17% of the vote. Very impressive start. And then in 94-95, they bested that by another 5 points to around 22% support. Their real breakout election was back in 99 when they got 27% support. And that's when they formed their first coalition government with the Austrian People's Party. The People's Party is the more center-right establishment party. Austria actually got sanctioned by the EU back then when they formed that alliance, that governing coalition, because the bullies in Brussels said, you know, the so-called far right is not somebody you're supposed to form a coalition with. Well, how times have changed since then. Sorry, EU, you better get used to it. And by the way, this is all happening when the Austrian Freedom Party was led by Jörg Haider, who unfortunately died back in 2008 in a car crash. But Haider took over the party in the 80s, and he fashioned it as a populist right party, taking on Germany's ruling globalist elite on behalf of the people. Remember, that is key to understanding what populism fundamentally is. Populism is a structural politics in that it realigns the electorate around a vertical divide as opposed to a horizontal divide. So when we think of politics, we generally think of a horizontal divide, right? Left versus right, Democrats versus Republicans, liberals versus conservatives. But populists literally stand that divide on its head. They realign themselves around a more vertical divide. So it's the people versus the permanent political class, the ruled versus the rulers, the ordinary citizen versus the oligarchs. And that, as I understand, is what Haider's legacy was. He fashioned the Austrian Freedom Party into a thoroughly nationalist populist party. So getting back to the historical context here, that was back in 1999. They formed a coalition government, but it soon fell apart just a few years later. And the Freedom Party pretty much imploded in terms of their popularity. They collapsed at just 10% support. And they stayed there for some time until their new leader, Heinz Christian Strache, was able to lead the party back to some big gains all the way to 2017, when they once again hit that 26% support and once again formed a governing coalition with the Austrian People's Party, led by the youngest chancellor in all of Europe, Sebastian Kurz. And then once again, a couple of years later, the coalition fell apart after a big scandal involving their leader, Strache, and it became public. And so once again, their support collapsed them to just about 16% support. But now, of course, with their new leadership, they've surged back, and this time into first place, coming just shy of 30%. It's their best showing ever. They are now the number one party in all of Austria. Now, if you've been following this channel for some time, and if not, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. But if you've been with us, for the last several months at least, then you'll know that what happened in Austria yesterday really is part of a much wider phenomenon, a much wider trend going on among the European population, where more and more Europeans are turning to the populist right en masse. Actually, I write a lot about that in this book here, Fight, about how Trump and the MAGA movement are changing the world quite literally. And Europe is on the forefront of that change. Just a few weeks back, Germany's Patriot Party, known as the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, they won two major elections back-to-back in the eastern German states of Thuringia and Saxony. The AfD won with 34% of the vote in Thuringia, and then they came in a very close second in neighboring Saxony, just behind the Christian Democrats. That's Angela Merkel's old party. They're the establishment center-right party. So they came in at just over 30% in Saxony. Overall, the AfD is now officially the single most popular political party in all of East Germany, which is leading a number of commentators to ask, is East Germany ready to secede from West Germany, given the West ongoing love affair with open borders globalism? We'll have to see what comes of that. The AfD also did very, very well just a couple of weeks ago, where they came in second in the latest Brandenburg elections. Again, a very, very close second, almost pulled off a first win. And of course, before those East German elections, Marine Le Pen's National Rally, they won France's European elections in June with, again, I think 34% of the vote. And then they had their best showing ever by far in their national elections just a few weeks later, despite Macron trying to intentionally sabotage that. Before that, you had Geert Wilders' Dutch Freedom Party. They won their first national election in the Netherlands, of course, with the help of the Farmers' Revolt that have completely overturned the WEF's plans on gutting European agriculture. I mean, we could go on and on and on. There's a stunning turn to the right, the civilizationalist right, happening among the European population in mass. And the British political scholar Matthew Goodwin has been writing quite a lot about the shift of late. What we have to understand is that Europe, along with the United States, is going through a major political realignment where more and more of their respective populations simply no longer trust their leaders and the way they've been managing their respective nations. It's basically a twofold process that we're seeing here in this political realignment. The first involves delegitimation, and the second process involves de-alignment. So you've got delegitimation on the one hand, and you've got de-alignment on the other. Trust in these secular globalist governments that have characterized the liberal era for the last few decades is basically in a free fall, most particularly among young voters, the youngest voters. It isn't a coincidence, as a number of analysts have shown, that a good chunk of the so-called far-right support comes from voters under the age of 30. I mean, think about it. After the financial collapse of 2008, after the austerity measures that were imposed, after the COVID insanity, they've just simply lost confidence in our governing elite. And so what delegitimation is doing is it's resulting in de-alignment, where more and more voters are less and less inclined towards the traditional political parties. Back in the 1960s, 50% of the British public felt closely aligned to one of the two major parties of the day, the Tories or Labour. Today, that number has dropped to just 10%. I mean, again, talk about an implosion. In a few years, it'll be in single digits. This is de-alignment. And what delegitimation and de-alignment are doing is they're working together to open up space now for new politicians and new policies to come in and take the nation in a new direction. I mean, this is what President Trump is. President Trump is a third-party candidate who won a major party nomination. When he was standing up on that debate stage with 16 of the GOP's finest, all groomed for this moment, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, you name it. He stood out like a sore thumb in the most wonderful way, in that he wasn't aligned in any way with the old neocon Republican establishment candidate. He was something new, and the Republican electorate has seen the party as so delegitimized, and they've been so de-aligned from any loyalty to it, that delegitimation and that de-alignment opened up space to allow a new candidate with new policies to come in and take the party and the nation in a different direction, a direction very, very different from that of the liberal globalist vision of the nation, either on the neoliberal side or the neocon side. So these are your so-called far-right politicians that are emerging, and they're emerging everywhere. Remember, back in 2000, only about 4% of the European Parliament seats, so the parliament in Brussels that represents the continent, only about 4% of the European Parliament seats were occupied by so-called far-right politicians. Today, that number is getting closer to 30%. These are your so-called far-right, when in point of fact, they're not far-right at all. They're representatives of the new consensus, the new anti-globalist, anti-liberal consensus. And if what just happened in Austria is any indicator, the days of the liberal globalists being in power are indeed coming to an end.